All right, hi guys. My name is Sky Huff. I have a Bachelor of Arts in Secondary English Education from UK, and now I'm here at Vanderbilt getting my Master's in Secondary Ed. And anyone who knows me knows I'm absolutely obsessed with literacy. And so, hopefully it's contagious. Maybe there's a cure. I'm not sure. But for a while now, several people have been asking me about my stance on technology in the classroom, and various questions about, taking notes on paper versus on the computer, and to anything, related to that, and including the distractions that students bring into the classroom on their phones, right? So I'm just gonna basically try to give a little spiel as quick as I can, as short and sweet as I can, about my stance on technology in the classroom. So I'm one of those really annoying people where I always take it back to the beginning. I think about, if my teaching was a pyramid structure, my teacher's stance is at the very, very bottom. I think it's just the broad structure that affects everything that I believe ideologically and pedagogically. So this is a very complicated question, but that's why I take it back to what is literacy. And literacy is a very complicated concept that I think we're consistently changing our minds about. And as we evolve as a society, we have new types of literacy and new skills. But I like to think of literacy as a set of skills. It's like how you have muscles, but you can't stop there at just the muscles, right? If I just only do bicep curls, and only bicep curls, I'm probably not going to be an Olympic swimmer anytime soon, right? So my definition of literacy always capitalizes on the fact that it is connective, it's kinetic, and it's coordinated. So literacy involves using lots of skills. It actually involves a term that is called multi-literacies. Literacy in itself requires literacy. It's one of those things that is just extremely metacognitive to think about. And so we break it down into these small components, but in reality, we use this all the time. And some of those skills are very innate, like language, but then what happens, especially in school, is that we make this systematic process of literacy. And this is what makes literacy a lifelong learning, a lifelong evolving practice. For example, I, have been using a computer since I was about 4, right? It's crazy how we have so many generations now that have virtually always had a digital text in their hands, scrolling social media. We have millennials, we have Gen Zers, we have those in-betweeners, but we have so many generations now that have grown up with these technologies. Computer use is a literacy inside itself, but the other day, I had to call the Vanderbilt libraries because I couldn't access a text. And, I don't know everything about computers, even though I've been using a computer since I was about 4 years old. Guys, I started typing and using computers when I was in kindergarten. And I'm still learning new things every day. I'm still gleaning meaning from new things every day. And that's the practice of literacy. So literacy is the connection and the coordination of different skills in a physical, present practice that helps us glean information and glean understanding and meaning from anything. But in education, we call that anything a text. So, in new literacy studies by the New London Group, They have been working for quite some time, gosh, probably like 20 years now maybe, on new literacy studies. So we now know that a text means anything. And it's crazy how much of an access we have to text now. You can get the newspaper from Delaware on your computer, even if you're in California. You can read the Bible on the internet. You can access so many different cultures, so many different discourses. And the process of scrolling through social media, making those connections, there's so much literacy in that. And, you know, we can now virtually have convergence and contact zones with new cultures and new understandings and new ways of thinking. It's crazy, the access that we have to the text. So when we think about what is literacy, what is a text, technology in the classroom surely fits into that. And, you know, this is kind of a side tangent, but there are many literacies involved in digital learning. You know, and that very popular, very widely circulated idea of academic achievement with students who are taking notes on paper, doing things on paper, versus students who are just looking at a screen, reading books off of a screen. They have a Nook. A lot of these scripted curriculums are on the computer. And, you know, studies show that students who do things on paper are still achieving and assessing at higher success rates than students who are completely virtual. And I have two concessions to that, really. First of all, when I started school, we were taught to, like, we learned how to use the computer, specifically with typing. So, because, you know, when you're taking notes, you're typing. And guys, I'm a really fast typer, okay? I'm a teacher's kid, and every summer in grade school, I will not admit if I did this any further past elementary school, I was on Type to Learn all the time. I loved it, and I'm a super fast typer. So sometimes I have resorted to using a computer, typing my notes in class, simply because I can type so fast, right? And additionally, I don't have to look at the keyboard or at my computer screen to type quickly and accurately. So that means I can pay attention to the screen and listen to the teacher, and I can type things in my own words. I can, you know, copy off of the screen without having to do that, as much of that multitasking as it requires for students that we see today. Sorry, my puppy's probably getting in this video. Like my cousin who is 12, gosh, she's getting old. My cousin who is 12, he types like this, okay? Because students today are not getting near the typing instruction and the computer literacy instruction that we got when we were starting in kindergarten. Like how long I've had it practicing this literacy type, right? And he's a whiz at it, because our bodies can adapt to anything, our brains can adapt to anything. But this may be going like really, really deep, but when we are participating in typing, which is a literacy inside of itself, we are not teaching the syntax of typing, right? The discourse of typing. Students are actually learning to think, not even on the word level, but the letter, because they're thinking about everything in letters, spelling. Okay, now spelling is important, but spelling is only a small part of literacy, right? So that's a huge tangent. But I think that what we're doing in class is we're assuming that students just already know how to type, okay? But this leads to my second point. Well, it's the third point here, but my second concession. So, you know, we say the students who are doing things on paper, they tend to achieve higher, they get higher test scores, and they seem more motivated, right? And I kind of want to make a concession about that because it can be a bit biased, because I believe that students who do things on paper and do them well are very intrinsically motivated to do so. And this intrinsic motivation, it means a self-motivation where having a big grade on a test, that's enough motivation for them to do well, right? We all know those students, okay? I can't say I was ever really one of those, but that means that they already have the motivation, okay? They already have the motivation. They just need access to the content. And I mean, students who have that intrinsic motivation, they tend to actually have more access to the school culture than do students who typically don't do as well. That's a totally different practice, totally different conversation. But you got to think about all of those things, right? So this brings me back to when we think about literacy, we have computer literacy, we have typing literacy. We can't skip those steps, right? Because students, their language is evolving in a very innate way when they come into preschool and kindergarten. Now that's also a different conversation about what literacies and what language development they do have, but they do have those language skills. You know, you put a phone in front of any kid, even a baby that's 5 months old, if they can put their thumbs around it, they're gonna figure it out, right? That's how our brains work. We are very innate in our language ability, but we need to still be teaching typing the way that it was taught when it was new to everyone, okay? Because that is a literacy inside itself. And if we can get students thinking larger than the word and letter level, that will not only decrease the multitasking that is involved in using technology in the classroom, particularly during whole group instruction time, but it actually wires your brain to take in information in more of a literacy practice, thinking about the meaning, not just the words or the typing or the volume of words, because that's not really literacy. Now, that leads me to another point. A lot of our instruction today is very extrinsically motivated, especially with those scripted curriculums. Now, scripted curriculums aren't awful, you know, Common Core, these are all great. They have great learning goals and learning outcomes, but those can't be the goal themselves, right? Because when we're in this mode, I think a lot of times we don't have student-centered motivation. We don't think what's going to motivate students. We think what's going to motivate change, what's going to motivate learning. And this is a process rather than a goal. And it's also a process that we want students to be able to continue like their entire lives, right? Anywhere you go, it doesn't even have to be college. You don't have to get your master's. You don't have to be a teacher. You don't even have to think about these things, right? Because they happen in a very automatic way after they're taught and learned, scaffolded, and developed. So anything that intrinsically motivates a student, which means they motivate themselves to access what they need to learn those skills and to develop the literacy practice, is a good thing. Now, that brings me to the demands on society. So we have this thing called capitalism, and capitalism affects education more than you would ever know, and I promise I'm not going to preach about that today. But capitalism, it extends farther than just money and choices and decisions. When we go out into the workforce, we become physical embodiments of capitalism. We are working to provide a good or service, and we're wanting to make a living off of that. We become active participants of our economy and of our society and our culture. And this is a direct link to demands on society, because society says we need this. So educators think we need to foster this, we need to facilitate this, right? So capitalism and demands on society, they're saying we're going paperless, right? We've all heard the word. Computer skills, that's where it's at right now. So when we link all of these things together, technology in the classroom gives us a chance to help students access the skills and the literacy that they need to have the demands that society wants. And this is producing that independence. And so society says we're going paperless, and we need to be attentive to that rather than being afraid of it or stubborn about it or just kind of ambivalent about that process. But when we're student motivated, one, there's all kinds of social media out there, and this pertains to technology in the classroom. That's a lot of intrinsic motivation. Okay, you tell your students, okay, now we're gonna write a 5-paragraph essay for our summative assessment. And you kind of get the unanimous groan in the room, right? In fact, around here, 5-paragraph essays, like bad words, do not use them, okay? Not that that's bad inside of itself, but when you tell students, okay, let's cite social media. We're gonna be talking about agency. And actually use and teach those technologies, those digital learning processes, that social media, and actually teach it. That's very intrinsically motivating, and it's helping students actually meet the demands on society. So this is a very, very long way to go about it, but having technology in the classroom is really only a good idea. Now, I understand there are distractions, and that's why I really think that you need a balance with things that are digital and things that are traditional and in paper. Like for reading, for example, I do think that there is a difference between reading a text on your Nook or reading a physical book. So this is a book that I'm reading right now. It's called Monday's Not Coming. Highly recommend it. It's really good so far. That's another video for another time. And as I'm reading this, there's something so physical about reading, like an actual book that you can touch, okay? Not only is it, you're like touching the pages, but, I'm reading and I might think I'm on page 20 and I see that the conflict has arisen, okay? And then I think, oh my gosh, I've got this whole book. When am I gonna find out, But what if the resolution actually comes in the middle of the book? Then I'm gonna be thinking, uh-oh, something else is bound to happen. That physical idea of what is a beginning, a middle, and an end, and situating it in a very physical way. This gives us a different literacy practice. That doesn't mean that reading on ebooks is bad or not productive. It's just different. So, I definitely think that we should be giving kids physical books. I think everybody needs to understand the magic that happens when you hold a book. At least I think that it's magic. Again, I have a problem. But I think that there needs to be a balance. And we need to actually be teaching students how to use these technologies in a productive way. We need to give them access, okay? And we need to allow them to intrinsically motivate themselves in a way that doesn't just manifest itself in students who already have the privilege of access to anything in society. Because, you know, it's crazy how you've probably been on social media lately. Everything is just blowing up, right? And it's crazy. I've been scrolling and I've been like, like, what was your English teacher doing? This is not a credible source, and people are sharing, and then they're like talking about it, and it's crazy, okay? It's crazy, just absolutely crazy to me. Like, how much access there is to a literacy that we like hardly ever actually develop in students. So I guess I don't really have an answer, like a definitive answer about allowing technology in the classroom, but I think it depends on the affective filter, which is a very, very, very deep topic that I won't go into. But are students in a situation where they can independently access learning, access that literacy process by typing? And what is the content? So you got to think, like the affective filter, it's basically a nuanced way of thinking about, are students actually able to learn? Like, are you throwing the pasta to the wall and is it sticking, right? So you got to think, like, what is my content? And are students able to independently access this from these technologies? If not, then, you know, I would teach the technologies, but you need to teach it in a way that teaches them the actual literacy practice of thinking about, you know, you've got your diction, you've got your syntax, you've got your discourse, capital D discourse, that's another video as well, and putting those all together to make it a connected, kinetic, and coordinated practice of literacy. So that's all that I will go into today. I don't know how long this video has gone, but if you've made it to the end of this, you are the real one. In just a brief summary, technology in the classroom is such a great idea. If you have access to it, if students can independently access it at some point, and if that creates this intrinsic motivation, because that is what we want to see in classrooms. So don't just assume that if a student is typing that they are distracted, or you know, a number of things, just not engaged, or not achieving, especially when it comes to test scores. Again, another tangent that I will not go into. But just think about, what is literacy, what is a text, what is intrinsically motivating to my students, and what are the demands on society? Because as educators, the best thing that we can do is be attentive to the literacy process that is going to help students be lifelong learners, lifelong achievers, and very valuable members of society, no matter what they do. All right. Be well, and stay away from panicking people and viruses, and go out and be a literate society.